The accusations came out of nowhere at Sunday dinner. One minute we were passing around Mom's famous pot roast. The next my husband David was standing up, tears in his eyes, foam clutched in his shaking hand. "I can't keep quiet anymore," he'd announce, his voice trembling with what I now know was fake emotion. "Emma's been unfaithful." The silence that followed was deafening. My fork clattered against my plate as I stared at him in disbelief. My mother-in-law gasped, clutching her pearls. My father-in-law's face turned red with anger. "What are you talking about?" I managed to say, my voice barely a whisper. David held up his phone, displaying what looked like text messages. "I found these on her phone. She's been seeing someone from work. For months. My name is Emma Chen, and at 35, I watched my carefully built life implode over fabricated evidence my husband had spent months creating. The worst part? I never saw it coming." "That's impossible," I said, standing up to look at the messages. But David pulled the phone away, tucking it into his pocket. "I've already shown them to my lawyer," he said, his voice hard. "Along with the hotel receipts, the secret email account, everything. It's over, Emma. I want a divorce." I looked around the table at the faces of the family I'd been part of for the last 10 years. My mother-in-law, Margaret, was already crying, while my father-in-law, Richard, stared at me with disgust. My sister-in-law, Sarah, wouldn't even meet my eyes. "This is insane," I said, my hands shaking. "I haven't done anything wrong." "David, you know that's not true." But he just shook his head, playing the part of the heartbroken husband perfectly. I didn't want to believe it either. "But the evidence," he trailed off, letting the implication hang in the air. I felt sick to my stomach. The room was spinning, and I could barely breathe. This couldn't be happening. Not after everything we built together. David and I had met fresh out of college, two ambitious kids with big dreams. He was starting his tech company, and I was beginning my career in finance. We supported each other, pushed each other to be better. Or at least, that's what I thought we were doing. "Emma," Richard's stern voice cut through my thoughts. "I think it's best if you leave now." I turned to him desperate. "Richard, please. You know me. I would never." "Get out," Margaret shrieked, suddenly finding her voice. "How dare you sit at my table after what you've done to my son?" I grabbed my purse with trembling hands and fled the house, tears blurring my vision. As I fumbled with my car keys, I heard the front door open behind me. For a moment, I hoped someone had come to their senses, had come to hear my side. But it was just David, that familiar smirk on his face that I'd somehow never truly seen before. "I'll have my lawyer contact yours," he said coolly. "Though I wouldn't expect much in the settlement. Adultery doesn't play well in court." I stared at him, finally seeing him clearly for the first time in our marriage. "Why are you doing this?" His smirk widened. "Because I can. Did you really think I'd let you benefit from all my hard work? The company's about to go public, Emma. I'm not sharing that with you." The truth hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't about infidelity. It was about money. David's company, Tech Vision, was on the verge of a massive IPO. As his wife, I would have been entitled to half of everything. But as an unfaithful spouse who caused the divorce, I'd be lucky to walk away with anything. "You won't get away with this," I said, but my voice sounded weak even to my own ears. He laughed, the sound cold and unfamiliar. "I already have. Good luck finding a lawyer who can fight those text messages, receipts, and emails. I had been created by the best in the business." I drove home in a daze, my mind racing. 10 years of marriage, gone in an instant. But it wasn't just the marriage. It was my reputation, my relationship with his family, my financial security. David had planned this meticulously, waiting for the perfect moment to spring his trap. The next few weeks were a blur of lawyers, paperwork, and humiliation. David's evidence was everywhere. Leaked to our friends, shared with our colleagues, even sent to my boss. People I'd known for years stopped speaking to me. Others whispered behind my back. My lawyer tried her best, but David had covered his tracks well. The fake messages looked real, complete with timestamps and location data. The hotel receipts appeared legitimate, down to the security camera footage he'd somehow doctored to show someone who looked like me entering and leaving with an unidentified man. "I'm sorry," my lawyer said after another brutal day in court. "But unless we can prove these are forgeries, the judge is going to side with him. And he's asking for everything. The house, the cars, his company shares." He's even going after your personal savings. I sat in her office. How did he do this? How did he plan all of this without me noticing? She sighed, shuffling through the papers on her desk. Men like David, they're patient. They wait for the right moment, build their case slowly. By the time you realize what's happening, it's too late. But she was wrong about one thing. It wasn't too late. Not for me, because while David was busy destroying my life, he'd forgotten one crucial detail about who I was, what I was capable of. Before I met David, I'd worked in corporate finance, specializing in hostile takeovers. I knew how to read between the lines, how to find weaknesses in seemingly impenetrable companies, and most importantly, I knew how to play the long game. That night, I sat in my small apartment, all I could afford after David froze our accounts, and started planning. The IPO was still months away. TechVision was valuable, but it had vulnerabilities. David had been so focused on his elaborate scheme to discredit me that he'd let other things slip. I opened my laptop and began digging. Years of working alongside David meant I knew where to look, what questions to ask. It took hours, but finally, I found what I was looking for. A small note in the company's financial records about an early investor, someone who'd been there before TechVision was anything more than an idea in David's head. Marcus John. I remembered David mentioning him once, dismissively referring to him as just some old guy who got lucky. But Marcus owned 15% of TechVision, shares that would be worth millions after the IPO. Shares that, for some reason, David had been trying to quietly buy back. I wrote down the name, a plan already forming in my mind. David thought he'd taken everything from me, but he'd forgotten the most important thing: my mind, my skills, my determination. He'd made me look like a cheater, but he was the real fraud. And I was going to prove it. Finding Marcus John proved harder than I expected. The man was practically a ghost. No social media presence, no public records beyond the bare minimum. But after 2 weeks of searching, I finally had an address. A modest house in San Francisco's Sunset District. I stood on his doorstep at 9 a.m. on a Saturday, heart pounding. This was my one shot. If I was wrong about this, I'd lose more than just my dignity. I'd lose any chance of exposing David's lies. The door opened, revealing an elderly Asian man in wire-rimmed glasses. He looked exactly like someone who'd made an early tech investment and then vanished from the spotlight. "Mr. John," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "My name is Emma Chen. I need to talk to you about TechVision." His eyes narrowed slightly. "David Chen's wife." "Ex-wife," I corrected, the words still bitter in my mouth. "And I think you know why I'm here." He studied me for a long moment, then stepped aside. "Come in. We have much to discuss." His living room was sparse but elegant, with traditional Chinese furniture and a stunning view of the ocean. He gestured for me to sit, then disappeared into the kitchen, returning with a pot of tea. "So," he said, pouring us each a cup, "you've discovered David's little secret." I leaned forward. "I know he's been trying to buy back your shares before the IPO. What I don't know is why." Marcus took a slow sip of his tea. "Because those shares aren't just shares. They're proof of what TechVision really is and who really created it." Over the next hour, Marcus told me everything. He hadn't just been an early investor, he'd been David's mentor, the original creator of the technology that would become TechVision's core product. David had been his student, helping to refine the code while learning the business. But then, Marcus said, his voice heavy with old pain, he decided he didn't want to share the credit. Or the profits. "He stole it from you," I whispered, the pieces falling into place. Marcus nodded. He locked me out of the system, registered patents in his name, and presented me with papers that made me just another investor. I was old, tired of fighting. I signed them. "But you kept the shares." A small smile crossed his face. "Insurance. As long as I held those shares, David couldn't completely erase me from the company's history. But now, with the IPO coming, he needs to tie up loose ends," I finished, "just like he did with me." I pulled out my laptop, showing Marcus what I'd found. Discrepancies in TechVision's patent applications, early development logs that didn't quite match the official timeline. Small things individually, but together they told a story. "Help me," I said quietly. "Help me prove what he did to both of us." Marcus was silent for a long time, staring into his teacup. Finally, he looked up, determination in his eyes. "I kept everything," he said. Every email, every line of original code, every conversation. I knew someday someone would need to know the truth. We spent the next month building our case. Marcus had been meticulous in his documentation, saving things David probably thought were long destroyed. Meanwhile, I worked with a tech expert to analyze the fake evidence David had used against me. The forgeries were good, but they weren't perfect. The real breakthrough came when we found David's connection to a digital forensics company, the same one that had created the fake texts and emails. A disgruntled employee there was more than happy to testify about their special projects for certain wealthy clients. But we didn't strike immediately. I remembered what my lawyer had said about patient men who waited for the right moment. Well, two could play at that game. I waited until 2 weeks before the IPO, when David was at his most vulnerable. The company was under intense scrutiny, every detail being examined by potential investors. It was the perfect time for some uncomfortable truths to come to light. The letter arrived at TechVision's headquarters on a Tuesday morning. Not from my lawyers, but from one of the most prestigious law firms in Silicon Valley, representing Marcus John. It laid out everything: the stolen technology, the fraudulent patents, the fake evidence used in my divorce. Most importantly, it offered a solution. Marcus would sell his shares and sign an NDA about the company's true origins, but not to David. To me. I was in a coffee shop across from TechVision when David called, his voice shaking with rage. "What the hell is this?" he demanded. "What have you done?" "Nothing compared to what you did," I replied calmly. "How's it feel, David? Having everything you built threatened by someone you underestimated? You can't do this. The IPO will be delayed indefinitely once investors learn of the patent disputes. Unless what?" I could hear the desperation creeping into his voice. "Unless you tell the truth. About everything. The technology you stole, the lies about me, all of it." He laughed, but it was hollow. "You're bluffing. You don't have the resources for this." "Check your email," I said softly. "I just sent you proof of every payment you made to create those fake texts and emails. Still think I'm bluffing?" The silence on the other end was deafening. "You have until tomorrow morning to decide," I continued. "Either you come clean, or Marcus, and I go public with everything. Your choice." I hung up, my hands shaking slightly. Years of working in finance had taught me that timing was everything. David had waited until the IPO was close to destroy me, thinking I'd be too broken to fight back. He was wrong. The next morning, David called a board meeting. I watched the live stream from Marcus's living room as he stood up, looking older and more defeated than I'd ever seen him. "I have an announcement to make," he began, his voice rough, "regarding the origins of TechVision's core technology and other matters." What followed was a full confession. He admitted to stealing Marcus's work, to fabricating evidence for our divorce, to everything. The board members sat in stunned silence as David dismantled his own carefully constructed lies. Within hours, the news was everywhere. TechVision's stock price plummeted. The IPO was postponed indefinitely. David was forced to step down as CEO. But the real victory came a week later, when the divorce court reopened our case. The judge was furious about the fraudulent evidence. The settlement was completely reversed. I received half of everything, including David's TechVision shares. Marcus sold his shares to me as planned, making me the company's largest individual shareholder. The board, desperate to salvage what was left of TechVision's reputation, asked me to take over as CEO. I stood in front of TechVision's headquarters, looking up at the building that had once represented everything I'd lost. Now it was mine. My phone buzzed. A text from David. "You've ruined me. I hope you're happy." I typed back a simple response. "No, David. You ruined yourself. I just made sure the truth came out." Later that evening, I sat in my new office, looking out over the city lights. Marcus had joined me, bringing a bottle of champagne. "To justice," he said, raising his glass. "And to patience." I smiled, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. David had tried to destroy me, thinking I would break. Instead, I'd emerged stronger, smarter, and more successful than ever. "You know what the best part is?" I said, turning to Marcus. He never saw it coming, just like I never saw his betrayal coming. The difference is I had truth on my side. Marcus nodded sagely. Truth has a way of finding its way to the surface. Sometimes it just needs a little help. The next few months were a whirlwind of changes. Under my leadership, TechVision refocused on its original mission, creating technology that helped people, not just profits. Marcus joined the board of directors, his contributions finally acknowledged. David? Last I heard, he'd moved to a small town somewhere, trying to escape his ruined reputation. His family, who'd been so quick to believe his lies about me, now wouldn't even speak to him. Sometimes karma works in mysterious ways. A year later, I was giving a speech at a women's business conference. The topic? Trust, Truth, and Triumph. How to rise after betrayal. The hardest lesson I learned, I told the audience, wasn't about business or technology. It was about patience. When someone tries to destroy you, they expect you to react immediately, emotionally. But sometimes the best revenge is taking your time, gathering your strength, and striking when they least expect it. I paused, looking out at the sea of faces. But more importantly, I learned that success isn't about getting even. It's about getting better. Better at what you do, better at who you are, better at recognizing both lies and opportunities. Because in the end, the truth always comes out. You just have to be strong enough to wait for it, and smart enough to know what to do when it does. The applause was thunderous, but I barely heard it. I was thinking about that Sunday dinner, the moment everything fell apart. If I could go back and tell myself what was coming, would I change anything? No, because sometimes you need to lose everything to realize just how much you're capable of gaining. Today, TechVision is stronger than ever. Marcus's original vision, combined with my financial expertise, has turned it into something we're both proud of. The company's success isn't built on lies anymore. It's built on innovation, integrity, and second chances. As for me, I learned that sometimes the worst betrayals can lead to the best opportunities. David thought he was writing the end of my story, but he was really just setting up the beginning of a much better one. And that's the thing about truth. It might take time, but it always finds its way to the light. You just have to be patient enough to wait for it, and brave enough to help it along when the time comes.